In 1873, the United States Mint made a decision that would effectively end an era of American currency, and most people living through it had no idea their pockets were holding a future ghost. This silver dollar represents the final breath of a design that had defined the American spirit for over 30 years, yet because of a massive shift in global economics, it almost vanished entirely. If you look at this coin, you aren't just looking at silver, you're looking at the evidence of a financial execution. Most collectors see the seated liberty and think of history, but they often miss the specific tragedy of the 1873 issue. It was a year of arrows and no arrows, a year of shifting weights, and a year where the very definition of what a dollar was supposed to be was torn apart. While thousands were minted, a staggering number of them never made it to a single palm or pocket. They were sent straight to the melting pots, turned back into raw bullion because the law had suddenly changed the rules of the game. This is why when you find one today, you aren't just finding a survivor, you're finding an escapee. To understand why this specific year carries such a heavy weight in the numismatic world, you have to look past the surface. At first glance, it appears to be a standard silver dollar, but 1873 was the year of the crime of 73. This wasn't a bank heist or a train robbery, it was a legislative act that demonetized silver. Imagine holding a coin that the government suddenly decided was no longer the standard of the nation. It created a panic that lasted decades, and it turned the 1873 seated liberty into one of the most elusive targets for those who understand what really happened in the halls of the mint. But there is a detail on some of these coins that most casual observers walk right past. It's a tiny distinction in the numbers of the date. In the early months of 1873, the mint used a specific style of 3 in the date, what experts call the closed 3. It almost looked like an 8 from a distance. Chief coiner A. Loudon Snowden eventually complained that the figures were too cramped, leading to the creation of the open 3. This transition didn't just change the look of the coin, it created a hierarchy of rarity that still keeps serious researchers awake at night. One of these versions is significantly harder to track down in high grades, and yet, to the untrained eye, they look identical. Have you ever wondered why some coins look too good for their age? When we examine the 1873 dollar, we have to talk about the concept of cabinet friction. Back in the 19th century, the few people who actually saved these coins didn't have plastic flips or vacuum-sealed flabs. They kept them in wooden cabinets. Over decades, the slight vibration of opening and closing a drawer would wear down the highest points of the design, the stars, the folds in Liberty's gown, the eagle's breast. It creates a haunting irony. A coin can be technically uncirculated, meaning it never spent a day in a store, and yet it can still bear the scars of time just from sitting still. As we move deeper into the anatomy of this dollar, we find the reverse side, the eagle. Take a close look at the olive branch and the arrows. In 1873, the mint was also producing a different kind of dollar called the trade dollar, intended for use in the Orient. Because of this, the standard seated Liberty dollar was viewed as redundant. It was the old guard being pushed out by a new, heavier competitor. This rivalry is why the 1873 seated Liberty is so scarce in the higher tiers of preservation. They weren't being saved, they were being replaced. This is where the story takes a turn that most people don't expect. Everything we've discussed, the melting, the legislative changes, the closed 3 versus the open 3, suggests that these coins should be impossible to find, and in many ways they are. But there is a persistent rumor among high-level estate buyers that several hoards of 1873 silver were stashed away by families who didn't trust the new paper currency of the era. These bankers' bags are the holy grail of the hobby. Every time a silver dollar from 1873 surfaces with an unusual level of luster, the community begins to wonder, is another hidden cache finally being revealed? The psychology of the collector is a strange thing. We don't just want the silver, we want the story of why the silver shouldn't be here. In 1873, the Philadelphia Mint struck just over 30,000 of these business strike dollars. In the world of coins, that is a remarkably low number. For comparison, later silver dollars were often struck by the millions. When you realize that the vast majority of those 30,000 were likely melted down during the silver buybacks of the 1890s, you start to realize that the population of surviving 1873 dollars is a fraction of a fraction. But there is an even deeper level to this mystery. Some 1873 dollars were struck as proofs, specially made for collectors with a mirror-like finish. These are the aristocrats of the series. However, because they were struck during a year of such immense transition, even the proofs carry the fingerprints of the chaos happening at the mint. Die clashes, where the two metal stamps hit each other without a coin in between, left ghostly impressions of the eagle on the front and liberty on the back. Seeing these clash marks is like seeing a glitch in the matrix of history. Very few people talk about the motto above the eagle. The phrase, "In God we trust," was still relatively new to the silver dollar in 1873, having been added only 7 years prior. On this specific date, the placement of that ribbon tells a story of the engraver's struggle to balance the design. If the ribbon is slightly shifted or the lettering shows signs of doubling, you aren't just looking at a mistake, you're looking at a human moment from a worker in Philadelphia over 150 years ago who was rushing to finish a production run before the laws changed forever. As we reach the final chapters of this coin's history, we have to address the why. Why does a piece of metal from 1873 command such reverence today? It's because it represents the end of the Old West era of coinage. After 1873, the American silver dollar would change its face and its purpose. The seated Liberty design, which had seen the country through the gold rush and the Civil War, was retired. This coin is the final page of that book. When a collector holds an 1873 dollar, they often talk about the feel of the silver. It has a different resonance than modern coins, but the real value isn't in the metal, it's in the silence of the coins that didn't survive. We value this one because of the millions that were lost to the furnace. It is a reminder that what the government gives, the government can also take away. And sometimes the only things that remain are the pieces that were hidden away in the dark. The most important thing to remember about the 1873 seated Liberty is that its rarity isn't just a matter of numbers, it's a matter of survival. It survived a literal act of Congress designed to make it disappear. It survived the melting pots of the 1890s, and it survived the silver booms of the 1960s. Every time silver prices spike, more of these historical artifacts are lost to people who only see the melt value, not the history. This leads us to a quiet realization that many people overlook until it's too late. As the decades pass, the number of genuine high-grade 1873 silver dollars is not just staying the same, it is slowly shrinking. Through cleaning, through damage, and simply neglect, these survivors are becoming even rarer. The coin you see today might be the only one of its kind left in that specific state of preservation. It makes you wonder, how many more of these are sitting in unsearched boxes, waiting for someone to realize that they aren't just looking at an old dollar, but at a survivor of the greatest currency purge in American history? And that is why, in the world of collecting, the most important coins are often the ones that were never supposed to exist at all.